you might say, okay, then why isn't this video called Make Worlds Double Elimination? Because if I had the choice, I absolutely would make Worlds Double Elimination overnight. The problem is this, expecting Riot to change the World Championship and its format, if you know Riot and you look at their kind of track record, their history with both how they've set their tournaments up, what they seemingly want from a tournament, the philosophy that informs it, and then how they go about changing it, it's just not plausible to expect Riot to actually listen and then change Worlds to Double Elimination, no matter what you say. Whereas I feel as though MSI, that actually seems a bit more plausible. Like, Riot is like a steamboat. If you want a steamboat, a massive streamliner to turn, it ain't going to happen immediately, and certainly isn't going to happen all at once. It's going to slowly and gradually happen. It's going to take a while. You better be sure about which direction you're going in, and eventually it'll be there. Riot's more like that. You can ask for and hopefully suggest smaller format tweaks. They clearly like single elimination. It's been so prevalent in their best tournaments, in their top Premier level competitions. I mean, amusingly to me, they use double elimination a number of times in those promotion tournaments to get teams into the LCS, but for some bizarre reason can't see the benefits of it elsewhere. Okay, one of those weird things. I assume a different person was in charge of making that decision, that executive decision, as it were. Then you've got to add in one of the main purposes of MSI and Worlds, as you can see by the way they structure it, unlike tournaments like the International and the CSGO Major, which are more about just having the best teams and just playing the best tournament, is in League of Legends you want to have the different regions play each other, right? That's why you have the group stages where you definitely play teams from the other regions. That's why at MSI you want the group stage to play every single other opponent. Even though I'm not a fan of round robin, I get why there's a purpose to that for League of Legends. Well, this would produce more games between the best teams from each of the regions, so we could see them match up a number of times, not just maybe once in a year or once in a year in a best of one. They never played in a best of 5, a best of 3. This way you get more of those matches, which was the kind of the remit of what MSI is supposed to be. Then, as I alluded to with RNG, it means that the seeding for the playoffs isn't going to kill you dead. You can overcome that. There's almost an error correcting element. If in fact there was a wacky one-off best of 1 that's now changed where people are seeded, they can go through the lower bracket and meet people later on. And as I've alluded to before, no storyline in esports, quite frankly, is sicker than a team coming from the lower bracket all the way and then winning the final when they're underdogs, when the formats put them as underdogs, but they've managed to show resilience, come back, maybe adapt, find their real level, find a level they've never been at before. This makes it more special, more prestigious, more challenging to win these tournaments. So I think MSI would be the perfect kind of test tube, a laboratory experiment as to whether this format was good, and then let's see about the other tournaments. Let's ask something reasonable of, I mean, I personally think it's reasonable to change Worlds to be sick anyway, but you know, within the paradigm of League of Legends and what you expect from Riot Games. Let me just be very clear. I've seen all the great League of Legends teams, and I've seen all the great teams generally in the esports games I follow throughout the last 10, 5, 20 years, whatever it might be. There will never be another team like this. Even from this organization, in my opinion, if they change players. They'll still have some of these qualities, some of these intent, but this is a special mixture of these 5 players blended together, maybe even at this moment. Who knows? Who knows how many more years they can keep doing this? And it's a product of these 5 players and this coaching staff. It's lightning in a bottle. They probably couldn't create it again. Nobody could create it again. I think you could even contrast it with the best ever Asian teams and you won't find the same blend or the same number of strengths in these intangible ways, in my opinion. So I actually think, even though for championships, they maybe don't entirely equate with some of these names, in terms of these intangibles and what that's added to what they already had in their game with the fundamentals and the raw skill, I think you have to contrast them, not just to League of Legends teams. Let's go outside that. Let's go to Astralis in CSGO. Let's go to OG in Dota 2. Let's go to Rafa in Quake or Flash in StarCraft. That's the kind of special, once in a generation, once in a game, maybe team that we're talking about right now. Now, Kernirino says, do you think Guardian or Carrigan are destined to never win a major in CSGO? Or do you see a chance of this happening in the near future, considering the ridiculous exist move? Right, the thing is, as long as they keep this core together, so at a minimum, Nico, Guardian, Carrigan, I think that alone, hopefully you keep a reign, but it might not happen. You might have to change one player. As long as you keep that core together, I think you can have a crack at all these majors. And I think you could come into a major as like the 3rd or 4th best team and have a chance to win. So yes, of course you could win. Now, in the past of CSGO majors, you didn't tend to win the major unless you were actually a top 2 team going into the major. They tended to be the squads that won. Generally, there weren't that many upsets. Admittedly, the last few have seen a bunch of upsets and a bunch of surprise finalists, so a lot more is possible. I think actually that, I mean, this might sound bold to some people. I think both those players, whether on the same team or separately, by the end of CSGO, assuming they don't retire within the next year, will get a major. I think it will happen for them. I think in terms of Carrigan, he's had his flaws when he's been in semis and finals of majors, even though he's one round away from winning one now. But he's got so much talent as a leader, and he's so good at quickly putting squads together that as long as he's got some kind of international or a Danish squad, I think he could go back and take over some of the Danish talent. I think he'll get one.
If they could have a super server located next to LCS or something, and if the players would actually make use of it, but then the question arises, would they even make use of it? Right? Because you have people, they want to hide picks, or maybe they don't want to be shown up. Okay. Maybe they don't want to go on that server and be ranked 200 on that server because there's so many players playing and it's a competitive server. That could shatter some of the mentals, I'm sure, of some of the Western players.
What I said that thing before about how you don't just sit back or give up and then hope that another opportunity is gifted out of the heavens, comes down a bottle, you open it, there's a note in it that says go to this place and dig under the tree, there's marks the X, and that's where you get the magical amulet that gets you into the top team. You don't do any of that bullshit. The key thing is you need to work harder now to prove yourself now to get into the top team where you're then going to have all your success if you're a guy like Nitro now. Think of this analogy. Imagine that getting into the pro scene is like you have to get down a certain river somewhere and you're swimming down the river, and initially, maybe you're a talented swimmer, maybe you're an athletic guy, initially the water was quite shallow, it was quite cool, it was quite calm, and you could swim very easily, and you maybe even very rapidly you got down there. But then you come to a point where there's sort of a delta, all these other rivers are flowing into it, and this is the heavy competition, at least within your region. Now in this heavy competition, you get into part of it, but then it's a struggle. There's currents coming against you and you're swimming against and all this stuff. And you might have to exert an incredible amount of effort at this point just to make any progress at all. And it might feel like I'm giving my absolute all and I'm barely making it. How's this ever going to work? Because here's the thing. First of all, you are making progress, and that's because the forces are against you. If you keep going and you break through, eventually that'll dissipate. You'll come to a calm area again. And now, if you're capable of doing the kind of pace you did when you were making almost no progress in the delta area, now that same level of effort that you were putting out there in the calm area would make you blast through and you'd be a superstar, you'd prove yourself entirely. That has to be the mentality you have now. The same effort that you make at that point is what will make you a great player later, if you really have the mindset, the skills, the composure, the sort of frame of personality to do it. Maybe you don't. I don't know. You probably don't know at the moment for yourself. But this is where you have to be thinking, where your mind has to be, and what you have to set yourself to the task to do. He had almost no help at this LAN, and he had the best performance, one of them I've ever seen in my life. I think he's the best player in the whole world, and he's not even on a top 4 team. Be like that, but in your scene. Do that, and these places in Cloud9 and IBAB in these top teams, either it'll get so people will join your team, and you'll make your team better than theirs if you really are capable of that, or these people will come on hands and knees begging you to join. And guess what? Those same guys who said you were online or you weren't quite good enough, or I'd rather go with this experienced guy or this guy that I know, magically their opinion will have changed. Suddenly they'll know that you're sick and, I've always thought you were really good, and you know what, I'm glad you have a chance to join now, I'm really looking forward to playing with you. Magically their opinion will all change and you won't have to have done anything except play the game. So don't give up now. Now is the time where you'll do the work that decides if you'll be a great player. In terms of Team Liquid getting him, this one to me seems overwhelmingly the right move. First of all, Paul Belter certainly in North America can compete. You can win the championship with him. You can have one of the best LCS, one of the best Western teams with him. But I've seen him now at enough World Championships where I'm kind of out on him as a Worlds player. Like, if he's on a lower level team, fair enough, and they climb their way to third or second, some plucky team. But in terms of the best NALCS team, if you want to perform internationally, you want to do well, at best he's only going to be decent. He's never going to be a dominant international player. So you couple that with the situation Team Liquid's already in when they've got Impact, who first of all is in kind of a similar position, scaled down in terms of like, obviously he's not one of the best top players in the world, but again, domestically he's very good. You can win the championship with him domestically. Internationally, in the past, okay, he's better relative to what Paul Belter is at the moment than Paul Belter is, but he also, by the time this Worlds came around, looked about Paul Belter level, but except he's an import slot. So that also doesn't make as much sense. But you know, inevitably in League of Legends, you're going to have tank top metas. And in a tank top meta, Impact is not only a very competent player, he is going to be one of the best Western players in terms of Western region players at top lane if it's mainly tanks. And so in a world which is mainly tanks, but we have Doublelift as our AD carry and we have Jensen as our mid laner, now I'm liking that angle. Because yeah, we're not going for a pure triple threat team. Very few teams are ever going to be able to have that. But we have the very strong support of top laner with the strong carry, mid and AD carry position. So that now for me, gives a real team balance to Team Liquid that they didn't have before. It was so clearly the Doublelift show before, and everything else was really good. Like if you'd have had Poor Belter and a carry top laner, that would have made sense. If you have Impact and then a carry mid laner like you're going to have now, that makes sense. It was enough to win NA with just Doublelift and then competent or above average or good players for the West at those positions, but you can't have two of them not be a legit threat at mid lane and top, especially obviously not at this particular meta for this world. They got really kind of fucked on that angle there. But this is someone Doublelift can relate to as a superstar player, and a superstar player who hasn't been able to win in the past with some of his teams, someone he can trust because he knows that guy can play his role to a very high level and won't just fall apart in playoff games or choke it up in the LCS or be not as good as he is at the beginning of a split. So if you Doublelift, that's someone else you can rely on and know this guy's going to go hard and well. And it's not just about me. I'm not the only win condition. It's not about me getting fed and then winning the game. We've got a couple of ways to win the game now. And in fact, hopefully Doublelift's learned from his experience with Bjergsen, where they had that kind of mentality. They were the two real leaders of the team. They were the two star players, the two ones competing against each other for MVPs. Hopefully he learned some of the aspects of how he then dealt with his relationship with Bjergsen and whether or not they had great communication or great mentality or how they blamed each other. Hopefully he takes some of the lessons from that relationship, applies them to Jensen, helps Jensen get to a higher level, and himself is able to interact with his teammate better, and they can really be a true dual threat, both in the LCS, but more importantly, internationally as well. Now that goes the other way as well. I also think Jensen and Doublelift will find shared ground, and that Jensen's going to be happy to have a true MVP caliber player playing alongside him, because I know sure you can maybe make the case for Smoothie in past years, but that ain't the same as a threat coming out of a lane. Like a top laner, an AD carry, a mid laner, these are the positions where you want someone else you can trust who's a superstar at one of those roles. Then you feel like the whole game isn't on you. You don't feel like you're the main win condition. You don't feel as much direct pressure, but then you can also put pressure on yourself to perform because you got another monster alongside you. So I think for Jensen, this is very good psychologically. And I think for whatever reason he had his partial drop off this year, I think this can revitalize him and really bring him back to that killer focus of the player I saw in Season 6, who looked like he thought he was the best player in the LCS, thought he was the best player in the Worlds, in the West rather, and could go to Worlds and be a successful talent.
I think the days of being the contract broadcaster who shows up, puts on the suit, does a 5-hour on-broadcast show, and then gets off the show and kind of goes to their normal life, I think those days are fast ending. I think there will be a lot more of the co-streaming style, of the co-mingling, of being a personal kind of almost YouTube celebrity and also being a broadcaster. I think pure broadcasting, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, is definitely going to be on the wane, and I feel like a lot of new titles don't support it in the same way that League and CSGO do. And so, to your point, I think it is really important to make sure that fans and tournament directors and people who hire know who you are and what you're about. Like, that needs to be something that's bigger than a resume or a sample cast. Like, if it's known around the world that you are the LCK expert and historian, then that's so valuable because people can use you in a lot of different ways. If you're just a broadcaster who's shown that they're competent, I don't know if that gives you the same opportunities when you might be competing against a co-streamer who can get so much more viewership than you're going to provide to an official broadcast.
Everyone needs a support network, and mine is, of course, my Patreon community, the Scrominati, who in many ways, they're the Sonny to my Cher, saying, I got you, babe. So this video and all the others on my channel were kindly supported by the following names: Ahmed Hadjou, Mac Pugnatio Rajcula, Adam Tomlin, Animosity, Jensen Goh, Tosh, Toucan, And you know it. Jerky's Minion, my main man, always going to be referenced, one of the best patrons of all time. Would you like to ask a question in my AMA? Maybe you want to suggest a topic or a guest to say on my channel. Do you want teasers? Find out who the upcoming Reflections and Talk to Thorin interviews are. Maybe you want to do one of those long discussions where you get to set the topics we talk about. Well, if any of these or others appeal to you, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Skilluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.